My name is Deana McDonagh. This is Joyce Thomas. We are partners in crime.
So we're going to talk about shared language and its importance in business. And we're actually going to give you some innovative strategies today that you can actually use.
So when you look at a situation, we're aware that depending on the lens through which you look at the world and you look at yourself and others, can be skewed based on your experience, etc.
So you guys think you speak English, right? So what do you call this?
These are known as rubbers.
They're erasers. Come on. And so what covers the engine on this?
It's a bonnet.
No. It's the hood.
No.
Where do you put your Vera after you buy her at Kohl's?
Clearly in the boot.
No, that's the trunk.
Bangers.
Those are sausages.
This is a gob.
It's clearly a mouth.
A lorry.
No, that's a truck.
Zebra.
No, that's a crosswalk.
No.
It's a crosswalk.
And this is clearly a Z.
No, that's a Z.
Really?
Yeah. So in our language, clearly, even English is different from the UK to the US and
beyond,
I suppose. But in our own language, we have euphemisms and codes that we use all the time, right? So we had our financial persons up here a little while ago, and we were talking about finances, but we use lots of different words to describe them: bread, dough, moolah, scratch, right? Or if you're broke, that really means that you're insolvent, right? This one is good. Instead of saying shoplifting now, inventory shrinkage, right? Our store detectives were becoming politically correct, so they're the loss prevention specialists now. When the first foundation garments were introduced, they were foundation garments, but now everybody wears shapewear, right? Now this is for our geeks in the house. This is an acronym that, are you familiar with this one? Absolutely. So if you call into a call center and you're describing a problem that you're having with your computer, those call center guys might be saying, a picnic, problems in the chair, not in the computer. Or code 18, the user's head is 18 inches from the monitor, and that's the problem. It's not the computer at all. In business, you might have used this, done a SWOT analysis to look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Hopefully you will have looked at that. Or swag, a silly or a scientific wild-ass guess. I just love that one. But this would have a completely different meaning if you were at the Oscars, wouldn't it? You know, you'd take your little bag of swag home with you that would have all kinds of wonderful kinds of things.
And we often go to the Oscars.
We do. So clearly, you know, in language, the context is really important, right? So difference between business swag and Oscar swag, right? And one of the codes that I was taught when I first started in my industrial design job was that when any of the executives were suggesting ideas to you that you wanted to roll your eyes at, we would use the code, that's an idea, or that's a thought, or if it's really bad, it was, right? So we have lots of different kinds of codes that we use. So the key to understanding language is that you have to first notice what your language is. So this is a photograph of my graduate studio when my instructor was from the UK.
Long and suffering.
Long and suffering, and I was the only American at the University of Illinois, and I was surrounded by people from Korea and China and Germany. And so we were having a discussion in class one day.
And it was about empathy. And it's very important as a designer that you step outside your own experience, your own empathic horizon, and you gain some understanding about the person you're designing for. So I was talking about empathy as I do. And then they got out their little translation devices, and we realized very quickly that empathy was translated into sympathy. So even though we were having a conversation, sympathy really was not what I intended. You know, the difference between empathizing with somebody with disabilities and feeling sympathy for somebody with disabilities, very, very different. So at this point, we realized even using language, you have to double check. This goes back to your customer. What are they hearing? We realized that we can actually look identical. I am a twin. We ate the same food. We dressed the same way for a while. We had the same parents. And it goes on. But I couldn't design for her, and equally I wouldn't dream of guessing or guesstimating her needs and the use of her vernacular now.
So what exactly is shared language? It's dynamic tools that we use to promote inclusion and understanding by a group of people. So in our studio, after we came up with this example that was so glaringly obvious to us that we needed to really pay attention and notice our language, we created this illustration, and we said that we had technical and shared language. So we forget we're in a community of people who are like us so frequently when we're having our conversations that we don't realize, and we use these acronyms and this jargon outside of our own community, and people don't understand. And quite often people are afraid to ask, what does that mean? I don't know. They just kind of let it pass by. So we have culture-specific language too. In the case of our graduate studio, we had people from Asia that had to use translators that weren't giving accurate translations, right? And then just here within the States, we have regional and national different kinds of languages and social differences. You talk to people from the South, you talk to people from California. We have very different kinds of language patterns and the way we use our language. And if we're talking about people with disabilities, we're talking about person-first language, where the person comes before talking about their disabilities.
So looking at this slide, we realized early on there were 4 main areas when you think about trying to learn and develop a shared language between yourself and the customer, or as designers before you, designers and the typical user. There's got to be compromise, there's got to be a mutual respect, and it really requires a lot of patience and intention to actually work at that relationship. It takes time and effort. Equally, you take your time and effort with your learning the language of accountancy, the language of banking. And trust me, I really thought you all spoke English before I moved here. Then I landed and realized none of you could spell. That was a shocker. But then also, you all speak in acronyms. All of you. Even cats speak in acronyms in America. I've gone off on one, but go on, after you.
So we want to show you some illustrations of the way that we think as designers when we're developing projects, or how we communicate. So this is an illustration of one way that we might begin to brainstorm just on Post-it notes. So a phenomenal way to be able to develop ideas. Throw up a few words on a Post-it note, you put them up on a board, and you can organize your ideas in all different kinds of ways.
And just before you move to the next one, we're showing you this. How many of you do actually use these Post-it notes to brainstorm? How many have never thought of using Post-it notes? Okay, I mean, it's kind of amazing. We wrote this grant, and we wrote it in a very linear way, and we got feedback, and we were told it was rubbish, and we were both pulling our hair out, and then we went back and we actually used this way of thinking and connecting and cross-pollinating, and the grant application was successful. And I'm not saying it's just because we applied this technique.
I think it was.
I think so. I think the thinking behind it was much more fluid, it was much more innovative, it was freer, and it was lighter. And I think if you have any meetings, maybe take your minutes of meetings in this way. We did a workshop a few weeks ago on mind maps, and it was very powerful. incredibly effective. So what we're showing you here is this, like the bread and butter of how designers communicate. So it's an insight into where we're coming from, and hopefully we'll show you some images that you may not be that familiar with. This is a mood board. It's an emotional way to make sense of the problem that you're trying to solve or the context of your user. You could do this for your customer. These are purposefully abstract images.
And so in this case of a mood board, this was a person who has cerebral palsy, and we were exploring together a way that we could solve a problem that she had. And so she actually created 2 different versions of this mood board on one side, and these were images that she pulled out herself. On one, in the first row, she described how she felt: shy, fearful, sad, nervous, and frightened, and then how she expected to feel when we solved this problem, which was outgoing, well, happy, calm, peaceful. And so mood boards are not only for designers to use, but they're actually a good way to help you illustrate emotions around a problem and the way that you'd like to feel when the problem was solved. This is a group of people who have disabilities and people with abilities, a group of designers, a group of students that were in a variety of different kinds of fields studying together at the university. This was from a program that we called Disability and Relevant Design. And the point of this image is that regardless of whether they were Asian or American, what their culture, what their ethnicity was, what their ability or disability, what their specific field of study was, we're all people. And we have to be able to communicate with people on a very personal and intimate level. So what are some barriers to shared language? Jargon is one, right? We talked about that. Impatience, getting frustrated with people. Bias is a big barrier to shared language. Remember, what language is about context, and it's about noticing things. And you have to notice the language in yourself before you can actually communicate very effectively with other people. It can be about power controls and struggles as well, right? So we're unique observers. Language is the element that creates the me in me and the you in what you see, right? And so what do you see in these next pictures?
So this is somebody who's gone to have their hair cut and coloured. Is this what you had in mind? And the next image is somebody, and this person has no clothing on, this is pure ink. Now, I would say 10 years ago, this would have been really shocking. However, today people are having tattoos and piercings, etc. So this is slowly becoming not typical, but certainly maybe not the norm, but it's not that unusual now to see people customizing their bodies.
But you look at these images and you think, what would you think when you saw those people? Do you have a bias against them before you ever even have a conversation with them? And so you need to be aware of that reaction within yourself in order to be able to have a productive conversation with anyone, right? So as our understanding of the world is changing, so is language, right? And the meaning behind that language changes daily, right? So if we look at this image, we have a little girl in the middle who's doing a dance, and she is illustrating what in her mind is maybe a sailboat. And all the rest of the people sitting around her, what do they see in what she's demonstrating? Or are they seeing things in their own mind?
Can we point out that this is Joyce dancing, and I'm the person who's thinking about my cat, Maisie. And you know, have you ever looked at somebody and you think the lights are on but nobody's home? I mean, we teach students, and so we often look at this mass of 40 faces giving us the possum look. And again, sometimes you're talking to a customer or a potential user and you know they've switched off. Because just as your mind is all over the place, so is theirs. So sometimes you have to pull them back in. And again, this is where patience and tolerance and but being aware that I may say fag to you, and that's a cigarette where I come from. Or crack, I was with some Irish people the other night. Crack is conversation, but here it means something else. So I have to be very careful if I say, oh, they've gone outside for a fag, or, oh, we had a great crack the other night. You know, I have to be mindful that you're thinking of something else. And when we go for dinner anywhere, I ask for water. And I, without doubt, have to then look at Joyce.
She wants a water.
But you put a D in it. So have you all noticed you put a D in water when you speak?
No.
You do. So I'm asking for water. I have something clear in my mind, but the waiter has no idea on God's planet what I'm talking about. Over to you. So I was walking down, I was in a part of America, near San Francisco, and this is wonderful for all the wrong reasons. This is a broken, and I can't even say the H word, this is a sign for people with disabilities. And it's very, I think on the West Coast, they're very person first. So somebody with a disability, it's somebody with a disability, it's not disability first. So you wouldn't say, give me an example.
That you were handicapped.
Joyce has quadriplegia. No, the quadriplegic Joyce. You don't put the disability first, you always put the person first. So what, this captured me because this was a broken sign of, in our culture, broken people. And it was very, really compelling and very powerful. And if we move on to the next one, so that's kind of, that left me feeling kind of sad. Now this is really interesting. This is from Barclays Bank. This is an ATM. We call them cash dispensers. And what they've done here is that they've taken the vernacular of what the local people call an ATM. We call it a hole in the wall. So in that part of England, a hole in the wall, everybody understands you're going to get some money out of the hole in the wall. And so it stopped me in my tracks when I saw this, because there's a wonderful feeling when, have you ever done this when you've traveled or you've come to a new city and you see somebody's using the language that is your language. It's part of what makes you feel comfortable. And so listening to users, not patronizing them, but picking up on the vernacular is really important. And again, it shows here that even a bank like Barclays can listen to the great unwashed, the general public.
When a person dies, a whole library burns. This is an old African saying. The libraries were contained inside of a person for years and years. And so when that person died, the library that was within them went on. So when people fail to develop a shared language, that library remains shut. So if you can't communicate with your spouse, your colleagues, the suppliers that you work with, your customers, especially with your customers, if you fail to develop a shared language with them, then that is going to have a real negative impact on your communications and on your sales and the bottom line of your business ultimately. So why do we really need to develop this shared language, or why do we want to? And what would be the outcome of it if we could successfully develop shared languages? Our modern problems are much more complex rather than complicated. So they're multi-level problems that we deal with now. And if we can eliminate barriers in language, that helps us to be able to brainstorm and solve our problems better. And problems are frequently ambiguous. They're not straightforward. There's many levels to them. So complex problems can't be addressed from a single point of view. One person cannot solve all the problems that we have in the world, or in a big business, or even a small business. One person can't solve the problems that they encounter even in a sole proprietorship. They need to have support people like Nicole and Iman and our lawyers. We need to have, and our IT professionals. Even in a sole proprietorship, you have to address your problems from multiple points of view. So collaboration is really a way of life these days. We have to be able to develop a language with our collaborators that allows us to understand and communicate well.
And be very flexible with the language you use. And a good example of this is when your phone rings and you pick it up. Depending on who's on the end of the phone, you will suddenly take on a certain stance. Your body language may change. The language you use, even the language you speak, may change very much. I would anticipate you would speak differently to a girlfriend or boyfriend than you would your mother or the bank manager or the director of wherever you work. So just be aware it's flexible, it's dynamic. Words change their meaning over time. It's generational. It varies. So this is what we mean by it. They're not just complicated, they're complex.
So this collaboration is really critically important. In the medical industry, if you can't read the doctor's writing, if the pharmacist can't read the doctor's writing, you get the wrong prescription. That's why they're all having to type them out now. But equally, if the nurses and the doctors aren't working together on the problem, the collaboration isn't there. You're not going to get better, or it could take longer.
Actually, still on this one, in America, were your prescriptions written in Latin when you were young? I'm getting the possum look. What's going on with you all?
No.
It's just that because the doctors used to write, not only did doctors scribble, the medical doctors, they used to write it in Latin. I was interested.
What century were you born in?
Stop.
Shared.
This is my friend.
Shared language promotes communication beyond the superficial. So it's not just about talking at each other, it's the building relationships, the know, like, and trust.
And so we want to ask you, who is the millionaire here, or rather the billionaire? Who do you think? Because you're making some assumptions. The girl? She does rock. She's got attitude.
And so that's the point, is you can't tell who the millionaire is. We have no idea. We have an impression. The context, we have no context to really be able to tell. But even if we did, you maybe still couldn't really tell. So we're going to give you some strategies, and this is a new way of understanding language in order to help you relate and problem solve better. So our first strategy is making things visible. So when Steve Jobs started out at Pixar Studios and they worked to build Pixar Studios, initially it was going to be several buildings, and he decided that it had to be one large campus. And inside of that one large campus, there needed to be only one bathroom, a male bathroom and a female bathroom. Why?
Do you mean 2 bathrooms?
2 bathrooms, okay. 2 bathrooms. One, okay.
They were all worried about that.
And they have to pass each other like staircases every day. At some point in time of the day, you're going to run into somebody.
The sparks of imagination and things that could happen there, because people are there often, right?
And it's FaceTime. The more you see a person, slowly you build trust, even though sometimes you may never have spoken to them before.
Our second strategy is assume that everyone comes to the table with different knowledge, skills, and perspectives. You have to make that assumption. You have to remind yourself that constantly. Is this what you would think of as a grandmother?
This is my aim. I aim, when I hit 80, to be this woman.
So realize that what is obvious to one person is not to another. These sound like simple strategies, right? They sound like, oh, I know that. But you have to continually remind yourself of this. So we have a wonderful example here of my colleague who got herself an iPod Touch.
Can I just, before you slaughter me in front of an audience, I was outside the Illinois Simulator Laboratory on campus in Urbana-Champaign. This is totally high-tech. This is virtual environments. We've just had a high-powered meeting. And I'd just come out, and obviously my learned colleague here had asked me, are you available such a time? Over to Joyce.
And so she pulled out her iPod Touch, which she was so excited because now she could keep all of her information in one spot really well. And she was excited because she could get her email anywhere she thought, because Urbana-Champaign has Wi-Fi everywhere. So she was real excited. And so when I actually looked at what she had there,
this was an opportunity. It's white space. There's an opportunity there. Go back just one. The other thing you'll notice is I have an orange thing around my neck. That's what I carry my office key with. I walk around like a goat from Switzerland with a key around my neck because otherwise I'll lose it. And again, it's not that I'm stupid. It's not that I have special needs, despite what you're all thinking. It's just these are opportunity. This is where technology isn't working for us. Okay, that's a plea. This is an example of crap design.
Our fourth point is look from the point of the end user, our fourth strategy. This is critically important in shared language and in business. If you develop products that nobody will want to use, they're not going to buy them. If you develop products or sell products that don't work, people are going to get rid of them and they're going to talk about them on Facebook.
And even if they're phenomenal products that could change the world, if it doesn't resonate with them, you're going to have product abandonment. The products are going to be underused, they're going to be misused. And when we say product, we're talking about environment, services, protocol, whatever you want to experience, whatever experience you want for your customer. It could add all the effort, and you have one chance to impress, one opportunity.
And this goes to language as well, right? You have to pay attention to who it is that you're speaking to and understand, put yourself in their shoes to be able to understand what their thought process is. And our last strategy is that you have to recognize that shared commitment comes only after shared understanding. So you have to be very mindful of the people that you are communicating with in all different kinds of ways. So shared language is the stuff of collaboration across disciplines, across families and cultures. It's our ability to communicate in words, images, products, and more. And this image that I show here is an image from one of my professors when I did my undergraduate studies a zillion years ago, who was a professor of industrial design, and now he paints. And the reason that I bring this up is that I want you to consider what your sphere of influence is. When I was studying industrial design as an undergraduate, this man said to me that he never wanted to know too much about any specific product or subject that he was working on because that would make him be afraid to try things that might already exist. He might know too much and say, I can't try that, right? So he stops himself from learning too much about something so that he's not afraid to try something new. And this professor, I had two professors of industrial design, he wasn't my favorite one. And yet I teach my students this same thought process because I've used it every day of my life as I've developed products. If I research something so thoroughly that then I know that I can't do what I'm trying to do, right? And if I know just enough about it, I can try new things and I won't stop myself. And so when I started to think about what his sphere of influence was, this really reports very well back to what shared language is. So we start with you, right? And what's your sphere of influence? You have family, right? And so you have your parents, you have your children, you have your spouse, you have friends, you have neighbors, and then you have a sphere of influence in your business too, right? Your coworkers, products, services, customers, suppliers, key partners. This is what your sphere of influence, what your shared language touches. So I'm going to give you an example of me. So we're going to start out with Joyce. And in my family, I have my parents who have passed. I have my spouse who has his mother and 7 siblings. I have 2 children who are each married, so they have spouses. I have a sibling who is married. She has 2 children who each have a spouse who have grandchildren. So we're adding these numbers up. And so I probably have, 20 friends that I communicate with on a fairly regular basis, and maybe 20 neighbors. And then when we start to look at what my sphere of influence was in business, I've probably had well over 100 coworkers, maybe 12 or so key partners and suppliers. 100 customers, that's starting to add up to a fairly significant kind of number, right? Okay, so now we're going to add in Facebook. I've got 300 friends, and that's not very many. You have a lot more than that, don't you?
Oh, I do.
Right?
I need them.
And if we look at my LinkedIn connections, I have 371, and you're over 500. And Randy, how many do you have LinkedIn connections? 28,000.
But it's not a competition.
Okay. And I'm a member of 10 groups in LinkedIn, which gives me a reach of 43,333 people. My sphere got pretty big here, didn't it?
Do you see how awesome she is?
Now, I've been a product developer for a lot of years now, and over that number of years, more than 62 million products have been sold that I designed. And if you multiply that times 4, because these were vacuum cleaners and lawn and garden things, and more than one person touched them, right? That becomes a fairly significant number. And then if we add in the students, there's well over 500 students. So if we add up all of these things, all of these people, this is 93 million people in my sphere.
How many again, Randy?
Okay, so I challenge you to do the same thing for yourself and think about what your sphere of influence is and recognize that your language is critically important. Language is the lens through which we see the world, but it's also the lens through which the world sees you.
And we're creating the language of tomorrow. It's incredible how creative and innovative people are if you just take the time to develop a shared language. And we know people buy people, and it's not about the dollar. If you chase the dollar, innovation will not follow. If you chase innovation, the dollar will follow. And I think if you invest in shared language, I think your business will thrive. And
Thank you.
Thank you.